There are moments in life when you feel like your name doesn't carry weight, when the world has labeled you as insignificant, when your past whispers that you are unworthy, and when your circumstances make you believe that you are invisible. But let me remind you, God never needed the world's validation to use you. There will always be voices trying to tell you who you are and who you are not. Some will say you are not enough. Others will say you are too much. The world has a way of placing labels on women, measuring their worth by external standards, beauty, success, relationships, or achievements. But let me remind you, your worth is not up for discussion. It is not dependent on who acknowledges it or who fails to see it. Your worth is God-given, unshaken, and unchangeable. Too often we give people the power to define us, allowing their opinions to shape our confidence. If they praise us, we feel valued. If they reject us, we feel worthless. But true worth is not something people can give, and it is not something they can take away. It is woven into the very fabric of your being, placed inside of you before you even took your first breath. Think about the countless women who were overlooked, dismissed, or even ridiculed, only to rise above it all and walk in their divine purpose. There was a woman in Scripture who was considered insignificant by society, rejected, broken, and nameless to many, but God saw her. He saw her beyond the labels, beyond the circumstances, beyond the mistakes. And when he saw her, he restored her, elevated her, and used her to fulfill a purpose far greater than what anyone expected. Maybe you have spent too much time trying to prove yourself, trying to make people see your value, trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for you. But let me tell you something. You don't have to prove your worth. You simply have to own it. You are enough. Right now, just as you are. Your past does not disqualify you, and you are a woman of strength, resilience, and power. You were created with purpose. Even when people don't recognize it, even when they overlook you, even when they make you feel like you are of no importance, you must remember that their words do not hold the final say. The only voice that matters is the one that called you before you even knew who you were. So stop waiting for approval. Stop seeking validation. Stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to contain you. Walk like you know you are chosen. Speak like you know your voice carries weight. Move like you know you are backed by divine authority, because you, my sister, were never meant to be ordinary. You were never meant to fade into the background. You were created to stand, to shine, to impact. Your worth is not defined by others. It is defined by the one who created you, and that means it is limitless, unshakable, and beyond measure. Own it, walk in it, and never let anyone tell you otherwise. If you've ever felt like you weren't qualified, like your past was too messy, or like your flaws were too big to be used by God, let me remind you that God doesn't call the perfect, he calls the willing. He has a way of choosing the ones the world overlooks, the ones who have been counted out, the ones who don't have the perfect resume, the ones who have made mistakes. God specializes in calling the unlikely and turning them into vessels for his glory. Think about the people in the Bible whom God called. He didn't choose the ones with perfect backgrounds or spotless reputations. He called Moses, a man who doubted his own ability to speak. He called David, a shepherd boy that even his own father didn't think was worth mentioning. He called Esther, a young woman with no royal bloodline, and positioned her as a queen to save a nation. Over and over, God uses the ones that people least expect, proving that his power is greater than our qualification. Maybe you've been told that you don't have what it takes. Maybe you've looked at your past and thought, God can't use someone like me. But I want you to know that your past does not disqualify you. It prepares you. Your struggles, your failures, and even your pain are all part of the testimony God is shaping within you. He doesn't need you to be perfect. He just needs you to be available. Some of the greatest stories in history come from people who never thought they would be chosen. They were the broken ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who thought they were too far gone. But when God steps in, he rewrites the story. He takes the woman who thought she was too broken and makes her a healer. He takes the one who thought she was forgotten and gives her a voice. You don't have to be the strongest. You don't have to be the most qualified. You don't have to have it all together. All God is looking for is your yes, your willingness to step out in faith, your decision to trust him even when you feel unworthy. Because the truth is, if God called you, he already made a way for you. You don't have to figure it all out. You just have to trust that he will guide you. So stop doubting yourself. Stop believing the lie that you are not enough. Stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect conditions. The moment is now, and God has already chosen you. Whether people see it or not, whether they believe in you or not, God's call on your life is real. And when he calls, he equips. When he chooses, he prepares. When he sends, he goes before you. So step into your calling with confidence. Walk like you know you are chosen. Speak like you know you are appointed. And trust that God doesn't make mistakes. He called you on purpose. For a purpose. There are seasons in life when you feel unseen, when your work, your prayers, your sacrifices seem to go unnoticed. You give, you serve, you pour out, and yet it feels like no one sees you. But let me tell you something. Just because you are hidden doesn't mean you are forgotten. Just because you feel overlooked doesn't mean you are without purpose. God often does his greatest work in the shadows. He shapes, refines, and prepares you in the places where no one is watching. Look at David. Before he became king, he was tending sheep in isolation. Before Esther became queen, she spent time in preparation away from the spotlight. Before Jesus stepped into his public ministry, he spent years in obscurity, growing in wisdom and favor. They are preparation. Maybe you feel like you've been waiting too long. Maybe you've been asking God, when will it be my time? You see others being elevated, walking into their callings, receiving opportunities, and you wonder if you've been forgotten. But let me remind you, God is not ignoring you. He is investing in you. He is developing the character, the strength, and the resilience you will need for where he is taking you. A tree doesn't grow overnight. It spends time developing deep roots beneath the surface before it ever breaks through the ground. And that's what God is doing with you. He is strengthening your roots. He is building a foundation so strong that when you step into your purpose, you won't be shaken. So don't despise the hidden season. Don't rush what God is developing in you. This is the time to grow, to learn, to build your faith, to prepare for what's ahead. What feels like a delay is actually divine timing. What seems like silence is actually strategy. What feels like being overlooked is actually God's protection, because he will not release you prematurely into something you are not yet ready for. The world measures importance by visibility, but God measures it by obedience. You don't need a platform to have a purpose. You don't need applause to be anointed. You don't need to be in the spotlight to make an impact. Some of the most powerful work is done behind the scenes, in the quiet moments, in the places where, so keep going. Keep praying, keep showing up, keep being faithful even when no one is watching. Because when the time is right, God will bring you forward. He will open the doors. He will reveal the purpose. He will elevate you in ways you never expected. And when he does, you will realize that every hidden moment, every unseen sacrifice, every silent struggle was shaping you for something greater than you could have imagined. You are not forgotten. You are not insignificant. You are simply in the process. And when the time comes, you will step into your purpose with the strength, wisdom, and power that only comes from being prepared in the shadows. There comes a moment when you must stop waiting for permission to be who God created you to be. A moment when you realize that you don't have to shrink, apologize, or dim your light to make others comfortable. You were never meant to blend in. You were born to rise. And it's time to rise in your own power. For too long, you've been second-guessing yourself. You've let insecurity talk you out of your destiny. You've let fear convince you that you're not ready. You've let rejection make you believe that you're not worthy. But today, I want to remind you, everything you need is already inside of you. The strength, the wisdom, the anointing, it's already there. God placed it in you before you even knew who you were. And now, it's time to walk in it. No more waiting for someone to validate you. No more waiting for the perfect moment. No more waiting for things to feel easier. Your calling doesn't require the approval of people. Your destiny is not tied to whether or not others recognize your potential. If God said you are called, then you are called. If He said you are chosen, then you are chosen. And no amount of doubt, fear, or opposition can change that. Think about the women in history who rose up despite the odds, women who refused to be silenced, women who walked boldly in their purpose even when it was uncomfortable. They didn't wait to be given a platform, they built one. They didn't wait to be told they were enough, they knew they were. And that same power lives inside of you. Maybe you've been holding back because you don't feel qualified. But let me remind you, God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. He doesn't need you to have it all figured out, He just needs you to be willing. Willing to step forward, willing to trust Him, willing to take up space and own the power He has given you. There is something powerful about a woman who knows who she is, a woman who no longer asks for permission to exist in her full potential, a woman who understands that she carries something valuable and refuses to let fear rob her of her destiny. So this is your moment. Stop playing small. Stop doubting your own voice. Stop running from the power inside of you. Walk like you know you are anointed. Speak like your words carry weight. Move like the atmosphere shifts when you enter the room. Because you, my sister, were created for more than mediocrity. The world is waiting for what's inside of you. The gifts, the wisdom, the strength. It's all needed. So step out, stand tall, rise in your own power, because you were never meant to sit on the sidelines. You were always meant to lead, to impact, to change the world. It's your time. Walk boldly, speak fearlessly, rise unapologetically. The power is already in you. Now